My dad tore down the blanket while I slept so he could protect my daughter at 2 a.m., pressing it to his chest when I screamed. When I demanded he stay away, he smiled and said, "Family shouldn't hide from family." I just walked away. That was 3 years ago. Yesterday, he was being led away in handcuffs, still muttering about doors. Ever since I was born, our house had an open door policy, if that open door policy took steroids. My dad specifically loved enforcing it and always told us that if a door was left closed, I could say goodbye to it. I always thought he was joking until I turned 5 and experienced it myself. I was in the room with my dolls with a closed door when suddenly it slammed open. Next thing I knew, Dad had his tools out and was taking the door clean off its hinges. He then went out into the back and burned it. It still had my bunny stickers on it, but he didn't care how hard I cried. On top of that, by dinner, not only the door, but the dolls I'd bought with my own money were burned too. I cried to my mom, but all she could say was that Dad had anxiety about hidden dangers, so it was best to just let him feel safe. Thing is, this only got worse as I got older. When I got my first period, I desperately wanted some privacy, but the curtain my dad installed wouldn't fully close. Naturally, I shut the door. That's when he barged in claiming, "Nothing natural needs hiding." He stood there while I changed my tampon in the shower, telling me not to be shy. I thought it couldn't get much worse, but I was wrong. After weeks of begging my mom for a sleepover, she finally agreed for my 14th birthday. My friends arrived excited, having never visited, until they saw our doorless house. There were a few strange glances thrown my way, but we moved on, running straight to my room giggling with excitement. But the happiness did not last long. My dad started hourly safety patrols with his flashlight peering into my room. He came in and examined every one of my friends, telling them to twirl to make sure they didn't have anything on him. And since I was the only one with the skirt, I had to twirl the longest. My friends were too creeped out and got their parents to pick them up. The next day in school, everyone was whispering about my doorless house and creepy dad. Their parents banned them from talking to me. I lost all my friends and became completely isolated. I remember at this time I began truly hating my dad, and that only intensified at 16. I woke up to him pulling off my blanket. I screamed at him, and he went red before claiming he was searching under my mattress for contraband. My mom actually tried to intervene, but she was dragged out of my room. All I heard was the slap before the house went silent. The next morning, my mom had a bruise, and my door frame had a camera set up in it. I left at 17 with just a backpack to go to college. I didn't speak to either of them for a full 20 years, and I should have left it like that. But one day, I decided to bring my 12-year-old daughter to visit. I didn't want to see dad, only mom. So I had her promise me that she'd keep my dad away from my daughter. She said yes. Well, at around 2 a.m., I woke to the feeling of my daughter pressing into my chest. She was sobbing that grandpa had been touching her hair. I looked up, and that's when I saw the blanket we had put up for some privacy had been torn down. Dad had been touching my daughter the whole time we slept. I rushed out and saw him in his room sleeping, pressing the blanket against his chest. I wanted to cull him on the spot, but before I had the chance to confront him, my mom appeared out of the bathroom. I could see visible signs of what must have been her attempting to stop him. She broke down and started apologizing profusely. It broke my heart as she explained how she hasn't slept properly in decades because of his nightly patrols. If she even covered her face with the blanket, she'd gain a new bruise. She even admitted to using buckets outside because he watched the bathroom constantly. When I asked her why she won't divorce him, she said it's because she still loves him. That's when I knew she'd never save herself. I began studying conservatorship law for months. I also started documenting everything with hidden cameras. I'd return to the house to stay the night, just to record him removing hinges at 3 a.m. and explaining to me why doors were dangerous. I returned to family gatherings just to mention people in the back garden, then record him freaking out and getting violent with the nearest person. Once I had all my evidence gathered, I called Adult Protective Services. They saw the doorless house and mom's condition. I was there when it happened, and once my dad realized what was happening, he attacked the social worker. While attacking, he started ranting about doors being deceptive and demanded they let him protect his family how he sees fit. The police had to get involved. They evaluated and released him, but the report was filed. A few months later, at the conservatorship hearing, Dad still insisted doors hid dangers. Unfortunately for him, the judge watched footage of him in my old room. She heard my mom testify about the buckets and bruises through tears. This was more than enough in itself, but my dad nailed the hammer in the coffin himself when he screamed that we were conspiring against him. The court granted conservatorship immediately. They placed him in a secure memory facility. I watched security restrain him as the heavy door swung shut. The electronic lock clicked. It was the first door he couldn't remove. He pounded against it, begging. But those doors only opened from the outside. 3 years passed by. I visited him every so often, and it was always the same, until last week. I asked the nurse to take me to him, and that's when she dropped it. "Your dad was released last week." My heart stopped. Released? The word echoed in my mind as I stood frozen in the facility's sterile hallway. The nurse must have seen my expression because she quickly pulled up something on her tablet. According to our records, his conservatorship was terminated by court order. A family member petitioned for his release. She scrolled through the information. "It says here that your mother filed the paperwork." I grabbed the wall to steady myself. Mom. Of course it was Mom. 3 years of freedom, 3 years of her finally sleeping through the night without fear, and she'd thrown it all away. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. My daughter was at school, safe for now, but panic clawed at my chest as I ran to my car. The 20-minute drive to my childhood home felt like hours. The house looked different. Wrong. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed it immediately. The front door was gone. Not just open, but completely removed from its hinges. The empty frame gaped like a wound. I approached slowly, my body tense. Through the doorway, I could see straight into the living room. Mom sat on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. She looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile. When she saw me, tears immediately welled in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered before I could speak. "He promised he was better. The doctor said he'd made progress. Where is he?" My voice came out harder than intended. She pointed upstairs. "In your old room. He's been working on something up there for days." The familiar creak of the stairs under my feet brought back memories I'd tried tried to bury. At the top, I turned toward my childhood bedroom. The door frame still had the camera mount from years ago, though the camera itself was gone. Inside, Dad knelt on the floor, surrounded by tools and wooden planks. He looked up when I entered, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the man he used to be before the obsession consumed him. His hair had gone completely gray, his face gaunt, but his eyes still held that unsettling intensity. "You came back," he said, setting down his hammer. "I knew you would. I've been preparing." Preparing for what? He gestured to the planks, making it safe, all of it. No doors, no deception, just like it should be. He stood, brushing sawdust from his knees. "Your mother told me about your daughter, my granddaughter. She needs protection too." Ice flooded my veins. "You stay away from her. But she's family. Family needs protecting." He moved closer, and I backed toward the doorframe. "I made mistakes before. I see that now, but I understand better. The doctors helped me understand. It's not about removing doors. It's about removing barriers between family." I pulled out my phone, ready to call 911, but he knocked it from my hand. It clattered across the floor. "No outside interference," he said, his voice shifting to that familiar edge of paranoia. "They don't understand. They locked me away, kept me from my purpose. But your mother saw the truth. She knew I needed to come home." Downstairs, I heard Mom's footsteps. She appeared at the bottom of the stairs, wringing her hands. "Maybe we should all talk," she called up, like a family. Dad's face lit up. "Yes, family meeting. No barriers, no secrets." He turned back to me. "Your daughter should be here too. When does she get out of school?" "Never," I said firmly. "She's never coming here again." His expression darkened. "You can't hide her from me. Hiding creates danger. I learned that in the facility. The doctor said my instincts were right, just misdirected. Family shouldn't hide from family." I edged past him toward the stairs, but he grabbed my arm. His grip was still strong despite his age. "You left for 20 years, he said. 20 years of closed doors between us. Do you know what that did to your mother? To me? We're fixing that now. All of it." I yanked free and rushed downstairs. Mom stood by the front entrance, or what used to be the front entrance. The empty frame let in a cold breeze. "How could you?" I demanded. "After everything he put us through? He's different now," she insisted, though her voice wavered. "The medication helps. He hasn't hurt anyone. He removed the front door. That was my idea," she said quietly. "I thought if I showed him I understood, if I participated, he'd be satisfied with just the one door." A laugh came from upstairs. "Not quite right, not quite sane. One door? Oh, my dear, we're just getting started. Every door in this house, then every door in her house. My granddaughter's house too. Everyone safe, everyone visible. No more hiding." I grabbed Mom's shoulders. "You have to see this isn't right. He's not better. He's just learned new words for the same sickness." She pulled away. "Where else can he go? This is his home. I'm his wife, in sickness and in health." "This isn't sickness, Mom. This is danger. Active, real danger." Dad appeared at the top of the stairs carrying his toolbox. "I'll need your address," he called down, "for the safety modifications. Don't worry. I'll start with the exterior doors. You won't even notice I'm there until it's done." "I'm calling the police," I said, reaching for my phone before remembering it was still upstairs. "Go ahead," Dad said, descending slowly. "I'm not under conservatorship anymore. I have rights. A father's right to know where his daughter lives. A grandfather's right to ensure his granddaughter's safety." Mom's phone sat on the coffee table. I lunged for it, but Dad was quicker than I expected. He snatched it away and dropped it into his toolbox. "No outside interference," he repeated. "We handle this as a family." I backed toward the gaping front entrance. "This isn't over." "No," he agreed, smiling that unsettling smile I remembered from childhood. "It's just beginning. You can run, but you can't hide. Not anymore. No more doors between us." I fled to my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I pulled away, I saw him standing in the doorless entrance, toolbox in hand, watching me go. At my daughter's school, I waited in the pickup line, constantly checking my mirrors. When she climbed in, chattering about her day, I forced myself to smile and act normal. But my mind raced with plans. We needed to move, change schools, get a restraining order, something, anything. That night, after dinner, I tucked her into bed and triple-checked all our locks. Our apartment had good security, but would it be enough? I sat by her door, unable to sleep, listening for any sound in the hallway. The next morning brought a new horror. Our apartment building's front door stood propped open. The doorman said someone had jammed the lock mechanism during the night. "Weirdest thing," he said. "They didn't take anything, just broke the lock and left." I knew. Even without seeing him, I knew. At work, I could barely concentrate. Every sound made me jump. When the receptionist said I had a visitor, my blood ran cold. But it was Mom, looking haggard and small. "He's gone too far," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "Last night, after you left, he removed every interior door in the house. Every single one. The bathroom, the bedrooms, even the closets." I begged him to stop, but he wouldn't listen. "Then help me stop him," I urged. "We can file for another conservatorship. Get him back in treatment." She shook her head. "He's too smart now. He knows exactly what to say to seem rational. The doctors taught him the right words. He talks about open family communication and removing barriers to connection. To anyone who doesn't know better, it sounds almost reasonable. Then what do we do?" "I don't know," she admitted, "but I'm scared, not just of what he might do, but of what he's becoming. It's like the treatment made him worse, more focused, more determined." After she left, I called a lawyer, then another. They all said the same thing. Without evidence of immediate danger or violence, there was little they could do. His rights had been restored. The previous conservatorship actually worked in his favor, proof that he'd been successfully treated. That afternoon, I picked up my daughter early from school. We needed to disappear for a while, until I could figure out a plan. But as we walked to the car, I saw him. Dad stood across the street, toolbox at his feet, watching. My daughter noticed my tension. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Just get in the car." But she'd already followed my gaze. "Is that Grandpa? Why is he here?" Before I could stop her, she waved. He waved back, that unsettling smile spreading across his face. Then he picked up his toolbox and started walking toward us. I grabbed my daughter's hand and practically dragged her to the car, fumbling with the keys as Dad approached. My daughter protested, confused by my urgency, but I managed to get her buckled in just as he reached the sidewalk. I locked the doors and started the engine, pulling away as he stood there, toolbox box in hand, that smile never leaving his face. My daughter peppered me with questions during the drive home. I gave vague answers about Grandpa not being well, about needing to keep our distance for a while. She seemed to accept this, though I could see the confusion in her eyes through the rearview mirror. That evening, I called the school and explained the situation to the principal. She was sympathetic, but explained that without a restraining order, they couldn't prevent a grandparent from visiting during school hours. I hung up feeling more trapped than ever. The next few days passed in a blur of hypervigilance. I changed our routine, taking different routes to school, varying pickup times. I installed new locks on our apartment door, adding a chain and deadbolt. My daughter noticed the changes but didn't complain, sensing my anxiety. On the fourth day, I came home from work to find our apartment building's mailboxes had been tampered with. Mine hung open, the lock broken. The mail was still there, but several envelopes had been opened and resealed. Bills mostly, but also a letter from my daughter's school about an upcoming field trip. My stomach churned as I realized what this meant. He knew our routines now, our schedules. I confronted the building manager, who reviewed the security footage with me. The cameras showed a figure in a maintenance uniform working on the mailboxes around 2 a.m. The uniform obscured his face, but I recognized the way he moved, the slight hunch of his shoulders. The manager said he'd assumed it was routine maintenance and hadn't questioned it. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the hallway sent my heart racing. Around 3 a.m., I heard something at our door, a soft scratching sound, like metal on metal. I crept to the peephole but saw only darkness. Someone had covered it from the outside. I grabbed my phone and the baseball bat I'd started keeping by the bed. The scratching continued for several minutes before stopping abruptly. I waited, muscles tense, but heard nothing more. When morning came, I found fresh scratches around the lock and a small pile of metal shavings on the floor outside. I took photos of everything and went straight to the police station. The officer who took my report seemed sympathetic, but explained that without catching him in the act, there was little they could do. The scratches could have been from anything. The mailbox could have been vandalism. Without concrete proof it was Dad, their hands were tied. Frustrated and exhausted, I decided we needed to stay somewhere else for a while. I booked a hotel room across town, telling my daughter it was a fun adventure. She seemed excited about the pool and room service, unaware of the real reason for our sudden vacation. The hotel gave us 3 days of peace. I started to relax slightly, thinking maybe the distance would help. Maybe he'd give up if he couldn't find us. I should have known better. On the fourth morning, I woke to find a note slipped under our hotel room door. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. In Dad's distinctive handwriting, hiding creates danger. Room 412 has no deadbolt. The connecting door to 414 has a faulty lock. The emergency exit is blocked by a cleaning cart after midnight. I'm only trying to keep you safe. I packed our things immediately. At the front desk, I asked about security footage, but the night manager explained their hallway cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned around 4 a.m. Of course they had. We returned to our apartment because I had nowhere else to go. I couldn't afford to keep staying in hotels, and I couldn't miss more work. I needed to find a permanent solution, but every option seemed impossible without evidence of real danger. That afternoon, Mom called. Her voice sounded strained, exhausted. She told me Dad had been asking about my daughter's school schedule. She'd refused to tell him, and he'd responded by removing her bedroom door while she slept. She'd woken to find him standing over her, explaining that privacy was a privilege that had to be earned through transparency. I begged her again to help me file for another conservatorship, but she insisted it would only make things worse. The doctors had cleared him. The court had released him. Fighting would only escalate his paranoia. I hung up feeling more alone than ever. The next incident happened at my daughter's school. I just dropped her off when my phone rang. The principal's voice was carefully controlled as she explained that a man claiming to be my father had arrived with a toolbox, insisting he needed to inspect the classroom doors for safety violations. He'd been polite but persistent, and when they'd refused him entry, he'd stood outside the fence, taking photos and measurements. I raced back to the school. By the time I arrived, he was gone, but the principal showed me the business card he'd left. Safety First Home Inspections, it read, with a phone number I didn't recognize. The principal assured me they'd increase security and would call the police if he returned, but we both knew that might not be enough. That evening, I sat my daughter down and tried to explain, in terms a 12-year-old could understand, why we needed to be careful around Grandpa. She listened solemnly, then asked if he was sick. I said yes, in a way. She nodded like she understood, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. Another relationship stolen by his obsession. The pattern continued for 2 weeks. He'd appear at the edges of our life, never quite crossing the line into something arrestable. I'd find him sitting in his car outside my office. He'd be at the grocery store when we shopped, always in the next aisle, his cart full of tools. Once, I came home to find him chatting with our elderly neighbor, explaining how dangerous her apartment door was with its old lock. Mom called less frequently now. When she did, her voice sounded hollow. She told me he'd installed cameras throughout the house for safety. She couldn't use the bathroom without being watched. She'd started sleeping in her car some nights, but he always found her, gently explaining how dangerous cars were with their lockable doors. I started documenting everything obsessively. Photos, videos, dates, and times. I filled a notebook with incidents, building a case for anyone who would listen. But without violence, without explicit threats, it all seemed so benign on paper. A concerned grandfather, a safety-conscious father. Who would see the menace in that? The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Our building's doorman, Theo, pulled me aside one evening. He'd noticed the strange man hanging around and had done some digging. Turns out Dad had applied for a job at the building, claiming to be a security expert. He'd made it to the interview stage before Theo recognized him from my descriptions. Theo offered to help however he could. He started keeping a log of every time Dad appeared, noting times and behaviors. He also quietly warned the other building staff, creating an informal network of eyes watching for him. It helped, but it wasn't enough. Dad adapted, as he always did. He started sending packages to our apartment, always harmless items like safety brochures or child-proofing equipment.